Absolute Superman issue 7, Jason Aaron writing with Carmine Di Giandomenico on the art. And this is an issue that focuses all on this book's version, or this universe's version of Brainiac, and fleshes that out. And it's completely focused on him and his backstory, and sort of, well, how brutal and violent he is, if nothing else. So, yeah, we'll get into it.
Call me crazy.
Uh-huh.
I think this is the best issue of the book.
Ooh. I don't know if I'd say that, but I did like it a lot.
Also, like, for some context, I've not been a massive fan of this book. It's been probably my least favorite Absolute book by a good amount. And I've been on the verge of dropping it a couple of times, and I'm kind of just sticking with it because it's one of the 3 first flagship ones. And my other, they're going to do something with this Absolute Universe at some point down the road, and I'm going to be annoyed if I'm not reading it. But then issues like this, I'm like, oh, maybe. Just enough to keep me back on board.
No, I mean, the opening of this is basically is the Omega Men who are trying to storm one of the, what was the Lazarus? They're storming this Lazarus base where Brainiac is, and Brainiac just he uses his powers to like make one guy's skin just shrink off, another one starts vomiting up his own bones and organs. Like, it's full on grotesque body horror stuff. So the opening definitely grabbed me and caught my eye, and it's just this example of how severe he is. And we see what he looks like, at least right now, which is like these big robotic, almost like back horse-like kind of legs, and then the upper half's kind of your sort of more traditional Brainiac, but he's got a more sort of crazy look in his face. And it's not really obvious in that first full page spread of him, but you can sort of see it clearly as it goes on that he's got an exposed brain. So he's got this almost it makes me think of the Licker from Resident Evil is the first thing I think of, but I'm sure there's many fictional monsters that you can think of. So super grotesque, full on horror movie stuff with this, and then it goes into like the back. We see him talking to someone that he's like kind of like taken apart and is just barely alive on an operating table, and that's who he's telling a story to, where he's going through his backstory throughout the issue. At the end of the issue, we find out this is Peacemaker. This is the one that kind of went berserk and killed a bunch of people in that previous issue. The actual Peacemaker was his name, Christopher Smith. Him. But he's the one he's talking to throughout the whole issue, and it turns out he's pretty frustrated because this Superman character exists. He doesn't understand it, and he's demanding to know something, and he questions one of the bottled cities that he's got, and when they just sort of say, we don't know, he smashes the bottle city on the floor, he stomps on them. It, again, super dark, super, you know.
And obviously, another element of the big things being different in this universe is there is no Kandor City.
Yes.
They never went to Krypton. Like the Brainiacs just didn't even take notice of them.
Yeah, which is something that gets into later when we actually get we'll call it the conference call that comes later on in the issue. But like I say, the origin of this Brainiac is that he's not on Coley. We find out later he's on a ship, but he's on a ship of Brainiacs, and he's basically born, if you want to call it that, and he's told that he's Brainiac 419732. Or 419,732nd, whatever way you want to phrase it. And he's got one purpose: to shovel dead Brainiacs into like a furnace or whatever it is.
Big incinerator.
Yeah, dematerializer, whatever you want to call it. And he's not allowed to ask for anything above his station. Only levels 88 and above are allowed to like know anything about like more than what they were born with. And he's like, oh, what level am I? And he's like, 0. You're just a grunt. You're here to shovel, and your shift lasts as long as your life does. And we get this montage over pages of him just shoveling dead Brainiacs and getting more and more kind of unhinged and kind of to the point where
a couple of not quite dead Brainiacs,
and a couple of not quite dead ones, that are still barely alive and talking and try to attack him even. And there's a point where he's actually strung up like 4 dead Brainiacs, and he's talking to them like in Castaway with Wilson. He's like using some dead Brainiacs as puppets and like having conversations. And I'm like, this is a psychotic origin story for what the main Brainiac is in this universe.
Kind of like it.
Yeah, no, I'm into it. It's definitely super dark and
But by the time he like realizes he's the last Brainiac, it's like, oh, I'm Brainiac now, and he just goes nuts, basically.
Yeah, because he basically stops getting bodies to shovel, and he's like, oh, it's day 49,901. No more bodies, I've done. And he leaves to try and ask, like, hey, anyone around? And he finds out there's no one left on the ship. He's the last Brainiac on the ship. And he realizes that means that he is Brainiac 1 now. And as we see later in the conference call, that's not entirely true. There's clearly other pockets of Brainiacs all over the place. The collective still exists. It's just that for some reason, all of the Brainiacs on this ship are gone. And he's kind of given himself like level 100 clearance. He's taken over the ship, taken over everything that's on it. Now, how he ended up working for Ra's al Ghul on Earth and Lazarus, that still remains to be seen, right? If anything, I'm really curious now, because like, this Brainiac's so unhinged. Like, why did he agree to work for someone?
This Brainiac is very outside of that one thing. Like, why is he? That needs to be answered.
Yeah,
very Joker-esque.
Oh, yeah,
traditional Joker-esque, not absolute Joker.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolute Joker's very different from what we've seen so far.
Yes.
No, very curious. But I mean, I was very captivated by all of this, and the art from Giandomenico, who was getting to just do unhinged stuff here. Lots of body horror, like all these, because Brainiac's kind of a robotic thing, but there's also like an organic quality as well. It's very techno body horror kind of stuff. When he's dealing with all the dead bodies and the parts and all that, feels like something that would be straight out of Tetsuo the Iron Man or something like that. For all 4 of you who get that reference, hopefully it painted a picture. But yeah, no, I was super into all this backstory stuff. Yeah, the thing is though is that when Scott Snyder started doing this thing where Joker's face is cut off and we're going to see it like pinned on, that bothered me because it's this weird permanent change to the Joker that's obviously going to get reverted. Like, because this is the absolute universe, and you're saying, well, one, there's more Brainiac, so we could always have a more traditional Brainiac later if we really want to. But because this Brainiac is separate from the main world, and also because it's Brainiac, him having his brain exposed and having like tubes coming out of it, and it being all this kind of weird, I don't know. At a certain point, I don't even know what to call it. It's just so deranged. But there's some great art here where just as he's starting the call with all the other Brainiacs. There's a panel of him where he's mostly in darkness and silhouette with shadows, and it's only just like the eye glowing and a little bit of the side of his face that's appearing visible, and it's very Terminator. It's almost like he's like a psychotic Terminator, which is what's more scary, a Terminator who just has a mission and is just going to do it no matter what, or one that's kind of unhinged and like is questioning what it wants to do. Maybe that's the more scary of the two. At least the one that's got a mission and will carry it out no matter what. Well, once he's done the mission, that's it. It's
not personal, right?
Yes.
Whereas this, like, I don't know what he wants, but he wants something, obviously, and that makes him more unpredictable.
Yeah, very unpredictable. And there's some interesting stuff here where he's like asking all these Brainiacs, and they're all like, wait, which Brainiac started this call? Like, who is this? They clearly don't know that this like weird anomaly exists, this one that rose to power on the ship through happenstance. They don't know he exists. I feel like we almost need like a designated name for him. I guess Absolute Brainiac will do. They don't know Absolute Brainiac exists. So they're kind of questioning that a little bit in between, but he's there to call them all and say, hey, I need some information on the humanoid identified as Superman. Like, who is this? Where's he from? I've sent a sample of the red dust into the system here. Someone tell me something. And they're all basically just like belittling him and saying this is nonsense. No one's got powers like this. There is a small connection to the Green Lantern book here where they mention the Black Stars and Oa. So obviously that's something that's maybe teasing stuff from over there. And then eventually there's just one bubble at the end though that says Krypton. And I thought that was a really good pin drop at the end of the page, because it was kind of like, oh, they're all just, it's this cacophony of noise of them all saying this is ludicrous, this is nonsense. And then one single voice just says Krypton. And then explains where Krypton is. you know, what the sun was like, and that this dust kind of matches something from it, but no one really knows much about it. And just as they're talking about this, and she's explaining that there's like some radioactive properties, like, you know, she sent a sample of this, like, effectively kryptonite to this Brainiac, and it's like, hey, there's a bunch of different radioactive qualities to this. Our absolute Brainiac gets quite happy, and they start questioning, yeah, who started this call? Who are you? And he just like turns it off. He's like, oh, end transmission, we're done. So I do wonder if there's going to be like a part of this where the other Brainiacs eventually come to Earth because now they're aware that this Brainiac exists in some form.
I gotta take down the rogue Brainiac.
Yeah, he's a rogue Brainiac. That's the way to look at it. Which, to be fair, it's not like all Brainiacs in regular DC universe are all evil, right? Like, there's good Brainiacs. You know, the main one that we think of as the villain is kind of the I won't say the anomaly, but he's, you know, he's distinct. He's sort of risen to that from his own obsession, as opposed to this is what all Coloons want kind of thing.
Yeah, like, he is very singular like that, which I suppose is what makes this still Brainiac.
Yeah, it still feels it, even though it's a very different way for him to get there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I enjoyed all this teasing. And it turns out that he's not torturing Peacemaker. He's actually upgrading him with tech and something to help fight this new war against the Kryptonian. And, you know, you're going some place called Kansas, and that's kind of the tease at the end.
Yes, I suspect he is possibly being turned into this universe's version of Metallo.
There's a lot of metal on his arms and legs at the end, so that would make some sense, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, and then obviously he got the sample of the kryptonite. I'm like, maybe this is how he uses it.
Yeah, I can see that. If not Metallo, then yeah, I mean, the Metallo's the most likely one. I'm just trying to think if there's any other options that makes Pivot is with. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah. I think this was a good exploration of a new version of a character. It kind of got me excited to see how he, because there was already that big surprise that Ra's al Ghul, even though, I mean, the thing was called Lazarus, it shouldn't have been that much of a stretch to assume Ra's al Ghul was involved, but it was still kind of like a, oh, that's a Batman thing normally, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I still don't know how I feel about that, to be honest.
I think it's hard to say until we see how it plays out and what you know, what the relationship is.
But it doesn't immediately excite me like I think it was supposed to.
It's cute. I'm curious. I'm definitely curious about it. Which is something this Absolute universe has been doing with a lot of the better books, is keeping me on my toes and like how I understand the concepts and how they're playing with them and doing different things with them. You know, I actually, what's funny is I didn't necessarily even recognize that this was Di Giandomenico as I was reading the book, just because he has a specific look to his art typically, and I think this was because this was more horror pivoted. I think it actually kind of, I wouldn't say disguised it per se, but it kind of put it in a new light where I wasn't like thinking, oh, this reminds me of his Flash book or anything like that.
That's interesting. I thought, for me, I thought it was really distinctly him, personally.
I mean, I can see it when I'm looking for it. Like, I'm not saying that it's like, you know, completely disguised, but I think Giandomenico sometimes, like, I'll just look at the first page and instantly it'll just scream at me, like, who it is. And I didn't get that from this. It felt like it was, I don't know, maybe it's just the coloring and inking's a bit different than it normally would be for his work, or what.
It's the way he draws faces and bodies. They tend to be a lot, like, very angular and very, like, a lot of straight lines is what he does for a lot of it. And I don't know, that's still pretty present here.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had a good time. I mean, I've been enjoying the book anyway, and I'm excited that the villain side of it's starting to shape up. Because you know, when I look at the other books and I'm thinking of like how they're reshaping some of the villains, like I don't know how I feel about the Joker of Absolute Batman yet. Because I mean, I've only teased him a little bit, so it's hard to get a full feeling on him yet. But I like everything they did with this Brainiac here. It's an interesting, more horrific pivot, and especially since the Absolute Universe, as it was pitched, is supposed to be a sort of darker, you know, version. It's supposed to be something that's a little bit more on this side of things. So we expect it to be a bit more violent and a bit more cerebral in some ways. So, yeah, I quite liked it.
Yeah.
All right, what are you giving Absolute Superman?
I'll give it. I think a 7, which is I think the highest I've rated any issue of this book so far.
I think I definitely feel a bit more strong. I'm going at least an 8. I might even go 8.5 because I maybe it's because I'm a horror fan that some of this stuff like really was like scratching an itch that I didn't expect to see. Because I don't necessarily think of Superman villains being characters that I would compare to horror movie villains, but I think this sort of stepped into that, and I think it makes sense for this Absolute Universe to kind of go down that path a little bit with some of them. Obviously, a lot of Batman villains lend themselves well to more horror style approaches, but Superman is a little bit different, and I think I like seeing this approach to one of his characters. So, 8.5 for me.